I ran into the grade school teacher at a gay bar. I raced down the intersection of 12th Avenue, my tires loudly screeching as I made the bend with expert ease. The road and its route were familiar, but I had never needed to blitz through it in such a hurry before. I looked to my right where my 6-year-old daughter's face was set in determination. Just like myself, she needed to make it in time. Raising a kid has to be the scariest thing ever, especially when you're doing it on your own. You never know which of your little habits they could be subconsciously picking up, or how your actions could affect their growth. "Dad, traffic lights!" Hina called out with wide eyes. Her voice snapped me out of my thoughts, and I slammed down on the brakes in response, bringing the car to a screeching halt underneath traffic lights. "Hina, darling, are you alright?" I asked, as I looked her over and made sure she wasn't hurt anywhere. "I'm fine, Dad, I promised," she laughed as I tickled her a little. "Are you sure? You're awfully more ticklish than usual," I teased as I continued to tickle her sides. "Dad, come on!" Hina choked out in laughter. I'm forced to put my tickling on hold as the light turns green, and I put the car into gear. Today was very different than usual. While we would start our mornings with a more paced approach to getting to school, today I had terribly messed up and overslept. Hina wasn't one to complain, but I know she was less than pleased. There was a lot on the line for her. This term she was gunning for a perfect attendance record, and this shaky start on the first day of the new term wasn't looking good at all. If she arrived late today, then the entire term would be jeopardized. I wouldn't be able to live with myself if that happened. I slowed down into the school's busy parking lot and brought the car to a halt. Normally, I'd allow her to walk down to class herself because she always argued she was a big girl and didn't need me walking her to class. I would have to make an exception today. Scooping Hina out of the passenger seat, I grabbed her bags and broke into a half sprint towards the school. Glancing at the wall clock, we had less than 5 minutes before she was officially late. I had to take the stairs, the long way up because the elevator had just shut the moment we arrived in front of it. I glanced at my wristwatch for motivation, and sure enough, anxious energy coursed through me immediately. We had 3 minutes left. I eventually made it up 3 flights in less than 2 minutes and crashed through Hina's classroom door within a few seconds to spare. "Did we make it?" Hina asked out loud as I dramatically tried to recover my breath. All those years of sitting behind a desk were finally catching up to me. "You both played it a little close there, but you did," a foreign male voice answered back. My ears perked up in response. That wasn't right. Hina's teacher was the elderly Mrs. Senju, and she sounded nothing like this nice, sultry male voice presently speaking. I instinctively stepped in front of Hina, placing myself between her and the strange man with relative ease. "Isn't this Mrs. Senju's class?" The man looked up from the book he had over the lower half of his face, and I was taken back by the sheer handsomeness of him. He almost looked feminine, with long flowing hair and succulent clear skin. Handsome, terribly so, yet strikingly familiar. "Mrs. Senju retired before the new term began. It was really short notice, and the school is working on broadcast statement to send out to the parents," the devilishly handsome said. Well, the school should have moved faster to notify the parents," I said, stumbling slightly. I could barely hold on to my wits. The man was attractive. "Ryu," he said, stretching out his well-manicured hand at me. "Ryu Sato. I'm the new class teacher." I shook his hand, and it was deceptively stronger than you would imagine. "It's nice to make your acquaintance, Mr. Sato," I said, locking my gaze with his. Ryu seemed to welcome the intrusion. Likewise, he took a moment to study my appearance, and a part of me hoped he saw beyond the picturesque accountant in front of him. "Hi, I'm Hina Okiawa. Nice to meet you, Mr. Sato," Hina declared, breaking us from our moment. Mr. Sato turned around to acknowledge Hina, who had somehow gotten past him and began settling into her seat. "I'll be taking my leave now," I said as I quickly exited the classroom while Ryu was distracted. I couldn't help but feel I had seen him somewhere before, but I couldn't place it. The following weekend. Disappointingly, I did not see Mr. Sato for the rest of the week. I should have seen it coming. Hina wasn't fond of me walking her to class because the parents of the other kids didn't bother. There was no need to. Thankfully, work had been more than enough to occupy my mind this past week, seeing as our company was getting merged with another. By the time Friday evening rolled around, I needed a break. My colleagues and I often haunted a nice, quiet bar squeezed between Fujita Avenue and Namikaze 12th. It was perfect for unwinding. I dropped Hina off at my sister's place for the night, promising to pick her up early in the morning. Then I headed out. The bar named Rainbow Hideaway was perfect for me. I could stop being Mr. Okiawa, the lead accountant, and just be Kenji, the exhausted single father trying to desperately hold on to his wits. Soft jazz music played in the background as I took a seat at the counter, ordering a whiskey on the rocks. As I sipped my drink, my eyes roamed the room, and nothing was really out of place until I noticed a familiar figure at the far end of the bar. My heart skipped a beat. It was Ryu Sato, Hina's class teacher, and the very man who had been crossing my mind all week. He looked different outside the classroom, more relaxed, yet just as striking. Gathering what was left of my wits with a sprinkle of courage, I decided to approach him. After all, it was just a friendly encounter. What could possibly go wrong? "Mr. Sato," I called out as I reached his table. Ryu looked up, his eyes widening in surprise before a warm smile spread across his face. "Mr. Okiawa, right? What a surprise seeing you here. Please call me Kenji." "Mind if I join you?" I asked, gesturing to the empty seat next to him. "Not at all. Please sit." He motioned for me to take a seat. As I sat down, I couldn't help but feel the whiskey doing flips in my system. Here was the chance to get to know the man who had intrigued me so much. "So, what brings a man of your caliber here?" Ryu asked, taking a sip of his drink. I tried not to laugh. What did he mean by a man of my caliber? "Just needed to unwind after a long week. You?" I asked, swirling my drink in my glass. "Same here. It's been a hectic start to the term and I needed a break." We chatted for a while, sharing stories about our lives and work. I learned that Ryu was passionate about his teaching and had a knack for making his students feel special. He spoke with such warmth and sincerity that I found myself increasingly drawn to him. Ryu leaned in slightly, his eyes glinting with mischief. "So Kenji, do you often find yourself in bars like this, or is tonight a special occasion?" I chuckled, trying to keep my composure. "Not often. I usually prefer a quiet night at home with Hina, but tonight, I thought I'd treat myself. It's been quite the week." Ryu's smile widened. "Ah, devoted father. I find that very attractive." I felt my cheeks warm. "Well, Hina means the world to me. Everything I do is for her. And what about you, Kenji? What do you do for yourself?" Ryu's tone was teasing, but there was a genuine curiosity in his eyes. I guess I don't think about that much." I admitted, feeling a bit embarrassed. "I'm usually too busy with work and taking care of Hina." "That's admirable, but everyone needs a little self-care," Ryu said, his voice softening. "What do you enjoy doing in your free time when you have it?" "I like reading, mostly. I enjoy cooking. It's relaxing," I replied, grateful for the shift in topic. "What about you, Ryu? What do you do when you're not teaching?" Ryu's eyes lit up. "I love painting. I enjoy exploring new places too. Tokyo has so many hidden gems." "Painting, huh? I'd love to see some of your work sometime," I said, genuinely interested. Ryu's smile turned into a playful smirk. "Careful, Kenji. That almost sounded like an invitation to my place." I laughed, feeling a bit flustered yet bold at the same time. "Maybe it was." "Bold move, I like that," Ryu replied, his gaze lingering on me. We continued talking, the hours slipping by unnoticed. Ryu's presence was soothing, and I found myself opening up about my life, my struggles as a single father, and my dreams for Hina. Ryu listened intently, his gaze never wavering. At some point, the bartender announced the last call, and we reluctantly realized how late it had gotten. "Would you like to grab a coffee sometime?" Ryu asked as we stood to leave. "I'd love to continue our conversation." I hesitated for a moment, the implications of his offer sinking in, but the genuine interest in his eyes made the decision easier. "I'd like that, Ryu. Let's exchange numbers." We exchanged contact information, and as we walked out the bar side by side, I realized that it was nice to have company every now and then, and it didn't hurt that said company was this attractive. 2 days later. As per tradition, I spent Saturday with Hina. It was our unofficial father-daughter day, so we made pancakes and other light pastries and binged Barbie all day today. It was my final process of unwinding from a long week. Something about spending quality time with her. By evening, I got a text from Ryu. It was a simple message, but it sent my heart racing. How about that coffee sundae? There's a great cafe near the park, say 3 p.m. I smiled as I typed my reply. Sounds perfect, see you then. The thought of seeing him so soon again added an extra spring to my steps. Sunday couldn't come soon enough. When Sunday finally arrived, I dropped Hina off at my sister's place again and made my way to the cafe. It was a charming little spot with a view of the park, the perfect setting for our meetup. I arrived a bit early and found a table by the window. Moments later, Ryu walked in looking effortlessly stylish in a casual shirt and jeans. His smile lit up the room as he spotted me and made his way over. Hey Kenji, he greeted, sitting down across from me. Glad you can make it. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied, a little faster than I'd liked, feeling the butterflies in my stomach. We ordered our drinks and settled into an easy conversation. The hours flew by as we talked about any and everything from our favorite books to our childhood memories. With each passing minute, I felt more drawn to him, captivated by his intelligence and kindness, and with the way he looked at me, I could tell the feeling to a large extent was mutual. As the afternoon turned into evening, we decided to take a walk in the park. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom as the pink petals danced in the air around us. We strolled along the path enjoying the tranquility. At one point, we stopped by a bench under a particularly vibrant cherry tree. Thank you for today, Ryu, I said, turning to face him. I've had a wonderful time. Me too, Kenji, he replied, his soft voice. I'm really glad we met. An incoming call from my phone interrupted the small moment. It was my sister. She needed me to come get Hina because her work shift started in about 30 minutes. I'm sorry, I have to cut this short, Ryu, I apologized as I filled him in on the situation. He waved me off easily. It's not a problem, Kenji. I understand you have duties and obligations. Ryu and I parted ways with the promise to see each other soon and not allow another week pass us by. The next day. I don't like this, Daddy, Hina whined as I held her hands firmly and walked her to class. I know it was a bit selfish of me, but I needed to see Ryu again, and Hina was my ticket. I would have to make it up to her somehow. Maybe I could incorporate ice cream into our Saturday meetings. Maybe. The moment we arrived at her class, Hina synced off to catch up with her friends while Ryu and I had a small staring contest that lasted for about 0.5 seconds. A meager time frame in reality, but to us, it lasted a lifetime. Kenji, what a welcome surprise. I didn't expect to see you here this morning, Ryu said, taking my hands in his. I thought I'd stop by and say hi, seeing as our meeting yesterday was cut short. When did you both get so close? Hina asked, suddenly appearing behind me. The look in her eyes was nothing short of genuine curiosity. Mr. Sato and I ran into each other last weekend, and I came by to see if you would like to hang out later tonight after work, I carefully explained. Hina's mouth formed an O as she nodded along. Can I come along? Ryu and I both exchanged quick glances before breaking into polite chuckles. No, honey, it's a school night. Plus, you're too young to go out drinking. Hina's bottom lip protruded in protest. But I drink orange juice all the time. Ryu placed a calming hand on her shoulder. It's not quite the same thing, Hina, but let's do this instead. He pointed to the snack section of the classroom. How about you and the others and I have an orange juice party after lunch? It'll be my treat. Hina's eyes lit up. Really? Ryu nodded. Then Hina cheered all the way back to her seat. So I take it I'd be seeing you later tonight then, he said, extending his hand for a shake. I took it without hesitation. You won't believe what I have planned. To anyone looking in on the exchange, it would seem like two men casually trying to get along, but to Ryu and me, it was so much more than that. Later that night, the evening couldn't come any sooner. I called my sister explaining the situation, asking her to stay over with Hina. She agreed without hesitation, but I didn't miss the mischief in her voice as she wished me luck. I ignored it altogether, asking questions or getting defensive would only fan the flames of her curiosity. I arrived at the park entrance a few minutes early, pacing slightly to calm my nerves. When Ryu appeared, he looked dashing in his leather jacket and jeans, his hair tied back in a neat ponytail. Hey Kenji, he greeted me with a warm smile. What's this great spot you mentioned? You'll see, I waved him over trying to keep my voice steady. It's a bit of a walk, but it's worth it. Side by side, once again, we walked through the park, the evening air cool and refreshing. We talked about the events of our day, catching each other up on interesting highlights. As we reached the edge of the lake, the moonlight reflecting off the water created a serene, almost magical atmosphere. "This is beautiful," Ryu whispered softly, looking around in awe. "It's one of my favorite places," I announced. "I come here when I need to clear my head." We found a spot near the water's edge and settled down, the silence around us broken only by the gentle lapping of the water. I pulled out a couple of beers from my bag and handed one to Ryu. "To new beginnings," I toasted, raising my can. "To new beginnings," Ryu echoed, tapping his can against mine. As we drank, our conversation continued, but this time, we both went in depth about our lives, our hopes and our fears. I told him about how I'd met Hina's mom and how we were never married. She was a friend of a friend who I had a drunken night of passion with, and then Hina happened, but sadly, she passed away during childbirth. Ryu told me about how he had fled from college to go after his first love in South Korea. Sadly, it didn't work out too well for him. With every word, I felt closer to him. The initial nervousness I always seemed to feel when I met him washed away faster than it came this time. As the night wore on, the conversation grew quieter, and our pauses were now filled with an almost electric silence. We were sitting closer now, our shoulders brushing against each other, and I couldn't ignore how the moonlight cast its glow on Ryu's face. "Kenji," he said, his voice low and teasing. "You've been staring at me for a while now." I felt a blush creep up on my cheeks but didn't look away. "Maybe I just can't help myself," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryu's smile turned into a playful smirk. "Well, if you're going to stare, you might as well come closer." The invitation in his words was clear, and I didn't hesitate. Closing the small distance between us, I leaned in and kissed him. The park and the river seemed to fade away as our lips met, the kiss deepening quickly as we both gave in to the moment. We eventually pulled apart, both of us breathing heavily. "I've wanted to do that since I first saw you," Ryu admitted, his eyes locked on mine. "Me too," I confessed, feeling a mixture of exhilaration and relief. The kiss had set something off between us, and it wasn't long before we were kissing again, this time more passionately. We tumbled onto the grass, our hands exploring each other and roaming the length of our bodies. After what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, we finally broke apart, laughing softly. "We should probably get out of here before we get caught," Ryu said, his voice filled with amusement. "Good idea," I agreed, though part of me wanted to stay in that moment forever. We gathered our things and walked back to the park entrance, the air between us filled with possibilities and poorly restrained desire. When we eventually reached the street, Ryu turned to me with a playful glint in his eyes. "My place isn't far from here. Want to continue this there?" I didn't even need to think twice. "Lead the way." The walk to Ryu's place was a short one. Once inside, we barely made it past the door before we were kissing again, our hands fumbling to remove clothing. The rest of the night was a blur of passion and whispered words, a perfect way to tie things up if you asked me. The next morning, I woke up in Ryu's arms, the sunlight filtering through the curtains. It felt like a dream, but the warmth of his body against mine was proof enough that this was no dream. "Good morning," Ryu murmured, his voice husky with sleep. "Morning," I replied, smiling at him. We lay there for a while, savoring the quiet intimacy. Eventually, though, reality called, and I had to get back to Hina while he got ready for work. I reluctantly got out of bed and began to dress. "I had an amazing time," I said, as I finished dressing up. "Me too," Ryu replied, sitting up and watching me with a satisfied smile. "Let's do this again soon." "Definitely," I agreed, leaning down to kiss him one last time before I left. 1 month later. Waking up in Ryu's arms soon enough became a routine. After the first time we slept together, we became an unofficial thing. We were both extremely comfortable with each other, so it was only natural. We made time out to see each other almost every evening, but I had stopped coming to see him at school because, aside from it being his workplace, it was filled with a lot of impressionable kids. Things with Ryu were beautiful. It was the missing aspect of my life that I wasn't aware of, because ever since Hina came into the picture, it just been the two of us, and I was very much content. Speaking of Hina, I tried my possible best to make sure she wasn't affected by all of this. I ensured that she didn't find out that I had begun dating her class teacher. I didn't know how it would affect her, and I wasn't too eager to find out. Towards the end of the first month, Ryu and I got into our first major problem. One night, as we lay together in Ryu's bed, he brought up a topic I hadn't been expecting. "How do you feel about making this official? You know, calling ourselves a couple," he asked. My heart raced at his question. I hadn't anticipated this conversation tonight, and the weight of it pressed down on me. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Ryu, I really like what we have," I started, my voice hesitant, "but I don't know how to break the news to Hina that I'm seeing another man, much less her teacher. She's been through so much already, and I'm scared of how she'll react." Ryu's expression softened, but I could see the hint of disappointment in his eyes. "I understand, Kenji. It's a lot to take in, especially for a child, but you can't avoid it forever." I nodded, feeling a knot in my stomach. "I know, I just need more time to figure out how to tell her. Please, just bear with me a little longer." Ryu gave a small smile and squeezed my hand. "Okay, we'll take it slow, but please, don't shut me out." The conversation that day had jarred me. I hadn't thought ahead at all, and I was selfishly pursuing Ryu without thinking about my daughter. What if she didn't like the idea of us being together? What if she ended up hating us both? There were too many things that could go wrong, and it terrified me. Maybe it was time I stopped seeing Ryu. No, there was no way. I needed him. I couldn't imagine a life without him now. 3 days later. Despite convincing myself that I couldn't stop seeing Ryu, I found myself pulling away from him because the conversation still haunted me. The fear of labels and the potential impact on Hina hungrily gnawed at me. I still spoke with Ryu over the phone, but I couldn't bring myself to meet up with him anymore. Work became my convenient excuse, and I buried myself in it, hoping the distance would give me clarity on the matter at hand. Ryu, on the other hand, began to notice the growing distance. I can't say for sure what went through his mind, but I'm certain he might have reasoned that I was having second thoughts, or I was looking for a way out. Precisely 3 days after our conversation on our official status, Ryu called me to meet up because it was a public holiday and no one really would be working. I got spooked by the proposal, and I made an excuse almost on reflex about being at the office and being too busy with work. I could almost feel Ryu's disappointment. It broke my heart so much, but there was nothing I could do. I needed a little more time. What I didn't expect was for Ryu to drive down to my apartment and call me out on my little fib. He knocked on the door as anyone else would, and when I opened it, I was stunned to see him standing there with a prominent frown on his face. "Hey, Ryu, what are you doing here?" I shakily asked. "We need to talk, Kenji," Ryu said firmly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I can't keep doing this," he said, gesturing between us. "I need to know where we stand." I closed the door and turned to face Ryu, feeling an immense sense of dread. "Ryu, No, let me finish," Ryu interrupted. "I get that you're scared and that you have Hina to think about, but I need to know if we're actually going somewhere or if I'm just wasting my time. I can't be in a relationship where I feel like I'm constantly being pushed away." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Ryu, I'm not trying to push you away, I'm scared. I don't want to hurt Hina, and I don't want to lose you either." That seemed to tick Ryu off for some reason because his voice dropped dangerously low. "You know what, Kenji? I'm done. I'm sorry, but this isn't going to work out. I'm not some secret you're going to hide." With those words, Ryu stormed out of my house, and I just stood there frozen in shock as the only person who had made me happy aside from my daughter walked away from me. 1 week later. Tackling the week without Ryu felt like living a life without color, and despite my best efforts to carry on as if everything were fine, the weight of his absence was crushing. My routine now felt empty, and even spending time with Hina, my bright spot in all this darkness, wasn't lifting my spirits the way it usually did. It was Saturday again, our father-daughter day, and we were binging cartoon movies. Usually these moments were our happiest, filled with both our frantic laughter, but today, I felt a little disconnected, my mind occupied with thoughts of Ryu. Hina, perceptive as always, noticed, "Daddy, are you okay?" she asked, looking up at me with concern in her big, expressive eyes. I tried to give her a reassuring smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just a little tired." Hina wasn't convinced. Is it because of Mr. Sato? He's been sad all week, too. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Of course she noticed, and of course Ryu was affected too. I realized in that moment that I would never have a better opportunity to come clean. Hina, there's something I need to tell you, I said, taking a deep breath. It's about Mr. Sato and me. She tilted her head, curiosity shining in her eyes. What's it about? Well, I began, feeling the nerves knotting in my stomach. Mr. Sato and we've been spending a lot of time together. We like each other a lot. I guess you could say we're more than just friends. Hina's eyes widened, but she didn't look scared or upset, just surprised. You mean you both like each other? Yes, I confirmed, watching her carefully for any sign of distress. But I didn't know how to tell you, and I got scared. I didn't want you to be upset or confused, and because of that, I've hurt him, and now we're not talking. Hina was silent for a moment, processing everything I just said. I could see the wheels turning in her head. Then she looked at me with a surprising amount of maturity for a 6-year-old. Daddy, I just want you to be happy. If Mr. Sato makes you happy, you should talk to him. You always tell me to say sorry when I hurt someone, right? I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. You're right, Hina. You're absolutely right. She gave me a big reassuring hug. Go talk to him, Daddy. Fix it. I hugged Hina. She wouldn't for some time understand the gravity of the words she had said to me. With Hina on my side now, there was only one thing left to do. Win back Ryu's trust. 2 days later. The following Monday afternoon, I arrived at Hina's school a little later than usual to pick her up, a bouquet of cherry blossoms in my hand. My heart pounded as I walked through the familiar halls, each step bringing me closer to the man I had greatly upset, Ryu Sato. I had rehearsed my words over and over, hoping they would convey the depth of my regret and my desire to make things right with him. As I approached Ryu's classroom, I saw him talking to a few remaining students. He glanced up and noticed me standing there, his expression unreadable. I waited until the last child left before stepping inside. Hey, Ryu, I picked these for you, I said, handing him the bouquet. His eyes flickered with surprise as he took the flowers. Kenji, what are you doing here? I wanted to apologize properly, I began, my voice steady, despite the nervousness churning in my belly. I know I messed up, and I let my fears get the better of me. I treated you like an afterthought, like a dirty secret that I had to keep hidden. I'm sorry. Ryu listened, his expression stern and guarded. He didn't interrupt, which I took as a good sign. I've realized that I don't want to hide anymore, I continued. I want to be with you openly and honestly. I want you to be a part of my life, and that includes Hina's life too. Ryu's stern demeanor softened slightly, but he still seemed unsure. Kenji, this is a big step. Are you sure you're ready for this? Yes, I said firmly. That's why I want to invite you to dinner tonight, at my place, with Hina. I want us to spend time together, all three of us. I want to show you that I'm serious about this, about us. Ryu looked genuinely surprised. Are you sure? I don't want to force you into anything. I'm sure, I reassured him. Hina's excited to meet you outside of school, and I want to do this right. He took a deep breath, his eyes softening as he looked at me. All right, Kenji, I'll come to dinner. I appreciate the gesture. Thank you, Ryu. You won't regret it. Later that evening. Hina became my little assistant that evening as I prepared dinner. We made her favorite dish, teriyaki chicken with steamed vegetables and rice. I could see the excitement in her eyes over the meal and at having Mr. Sato over for dinner. When the doorbell rang, my heart did a flip. He really came. I opened the door to find Ryu standing there, looking slightly nervous, but holding a bottle of wine in front of his student's house. Hey, he said, offering a small smile. I brought this for dinner. Thank you, I replied, taking the bottle and stepping inside to let him in. Come on in. Dinner's almost ready. Ryu stepped inside, glancing around the apartment as he tried to make himself comfortable. Hina ran up to him, her eyes bright with excitement. Hi, Mr. Sato. Are you really having dinner with us? Ryu crouched down to her level, his smile widening. Yes, I am. And you can call me Ryu when we're out of school. Hina giggled. Okay, Ryu, I helped Daddy make dinner. I hope you like it. I'm sure I will, Ryu said warmly, standing up and following us to the dining area. Dinner went off beautifully. It was filled with laughter and light conversation. Hina chatted animatedly about her day at school, occasionally asking Ryu questions about his favorite things. Meanwhile, Ryu and I exchanged glances, the warmth of the evening slowly melting away the lingering tension between us. The three of us together in this moment was beyond perfect. After dinner, Hina declared it was time for a board game. We settled on the floor playing a round of her favorite game, which involved a lot of giggles, charades, and playful banter. As the evening finally drew to a close, the activities wound down, and I eventually tucked a sleeping Hina into bed and cleaned up the mess we had all made, with Ryu's help, of course. Once we finished, he and I sat on the couch, sipping the wine he had brought. Thank you for tonight, Ryu said quietly. It means a lot that you told her about us. I meant every word I said, I replied, taking his hand in mine. I want us to be a part of each other's lives. Ryu, you, Hina, and me. Ryu squeezed my hand gently, his eyes reflecting restrained affection. I'm glad we're giving this a chance, Kenji. So am I said, leaning in to kiss him softly. So am I. Ryu and I spent the next 3 years together before eventually tying the knot and relocating to the United States. It wasn't always smooth sailing for us, but we both made sure to go the extra mile for each other and our little family. The end. Do you think you could comfortably date your kid's school teacher?